It looked like it was mud. I don't know what it was. It was a flying saucer or what it was. It wasn't an airplane. It was not an airplane. It was down off the road.
You're listening to Pursuit of the Paranormal podcast with your hosts, Ash Ellis and Greg Tomlinson.
Hey Ash, how's it going?
Very well, Greg. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good. Good. Yeah, again, the start of the podcast is a bit frantic.
Did you not hear it?
I couldn't hear anything.
Oh, I could hear it.
No.
Anyway,
How you doing?
I'll edit it in. Good. We've just been interviewed on a live TikTok. Literally,
Yes.
the past hour on Paranormal Inc.'s TikTok, just talking about our podcast, our histories, and stuff. That was a fun little chat.
Yeah, it's nice to be asked the questions instead of asking the questions. So yeah, no, it's always good. And I feel like now though that everybody probably knows our origin story of how we met. I don't know now. It feels like we've said
I think all our regular listeners will probably sick of hearing it. We've been on that many different things recently.
But no, that was really good because I've met Jack in person at Churt Mill. In fact, when Ian and Matt done their like family friendly paranormal thing, I was there, so that was cool. So I have actually met him in person.
And I guess before we go into tonight's guest, so this Friday we will be continuing the charity month on the podcast and on our TikTok, and we will be live from Cannock Chase on Friday night from about 9 p.m. on our TikTok.
Yes. And the thing is, and I didn't realise it too, you said it the other day, it was the other day on the live, that that's where we first met each other in person, was at Cannock Chase, all those years ago. So back to where it started.
4 years ago, that would be now.
4 years ago. That's mental. Yeah. That's mental. So yeah, hoping for great things because it was spooky as shit last time. So loads of weird stuff happened. So that was our first Estes method where we got some
amazing results.
Weird results. Yeah.
So yeah, make sure you check us out on TikTok live on Friday as we start to get towards the end of Charity Month on the podcast.
Yes. So tonight we're fortunate enough to be joined by someone who's a writer. She's a broadcaster specialising in paranormal history, 19th century spiritualism and British folklore. She's the author of the Gothic novel Begotten, a forthcoming work of non-fiction, Buried England. She writes commercially on supernatural history and has worked with museum and cemetery trusts nationwide. I love a good cemetery. As a paranormal historian, she's also co-hosted Haunted Homecoming with Jack Osborne and Jonathan Ross, Unexplained Caught on Camera, The Yorkshire Exorcist 2, and has provided historical expertise on Paranormal Britain's Last Witch, Weird Britain, Spectre or Spectacle, and also, and I was at this particular event as well, in May, she received the Top Investigator Award at the Ghost Planet Network Awards at Parameet. I can't remember where it was. Hinkley? It was Hinkley, wasn't it? I think. She's also blogs under the name Burials and Beyond. And when not exploring cemeteries and haunted locations, she can usually be, these are her words now, she can usually be found in some dark, dusty corner with a big glass of wine and a good book. So, welcome tonight, Dr. Kate Cherrell. How are you?
Hello. Well, that was a hellish intro I've inadvertently given myself, isn't it? Well, thank you very much for having me.
Yeah, it worked. And I was quite surprised that I managed to get the whole thing out without too many issues.
Yeah, that was very impressive. Top reading. Well done.
Thank you. And I felt under pressure because you studied literature and all that stuff, which we'll come on to at university. So I felt even more of the heat trying to get that out. So, but thank you for joining us. It is great to have you on. And we had a blip a few weeks ago where I got the dates wrong. So I'm glad that we
It's
were
fine.
able to line this up
Everything
again.
happens for a reason. Everything's golden.
And weirdly, you are the second doctor that we've spoken to this week.
Oh, really?
Who'd have thought that? We had a doctor of
collecting.
psychology on the other night.
Uh-huh.
And now yourself a doctor of philosophy, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, completely useless doctorate. Where I can,
I don't know.
I can't diagnose you with anything, but by God, I can write you a damn good poem about it. That's sort of
I mean,
that's how useful mine is.
that sounds good. That's the kind of script that I want written. Definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Okay. Good.
So I did list off a load of accomplishments and things that you've been doing over the years. But before we get on to all this sort of newer stuff, how did you get into the paranormal, the cemeteries? I mentioned cemeteries. How did your paranormal journey begin?
Well, I think like most people who grew up in the 90s, it was kind of a bit of a prime time for being surrounded by paranormal entertainment, and certainly like UFO based entertainment as well. If you had any little sniff of interest in aliens, the world just opened up with, Scully and Mulder, and you were like, oh my God, this is my life, this is my people. So I very much hit the ground running culturally, but a lot of my interests were kind of just the things that made you a bit weird at school. Like I was a bit too into ghosts and a bit too into aliens. And my granddad had some strange sort of paranormal experiences when he was a younger lad. And so he sort of started filling my head with the possibilities of the universe, and he gave me a handful of my first ever books, really. So I had, my mum very diligently giving me Topsy and Tim and all of these nice little books, and my granddad would put me on his knee and say, now look at the glossy pictures in the Paranormal Encyclopedia, where there was like reproductions of, the Brown Lady of Raynham Hall, when there's the like famous ghost photograph, and that bloody photo of spontaneous human combustion where there's that little leg, and so that was a big part of my childhood, was burnt pensioners. But after that, I mean, my granddad had a lot to answer for, because he used to take me to cemeteries twice a week, every week. It was my local cemetery where a lot of my family were. We're not a healthy bunch. And so we went around these cemeteries twice a week, every week. And I had just this inherent love of death traditions and of funerary traditions and of cemeteries. And then on top of that, I had my interest in the paranormal that then escalated when I had some experiences of my own as a teenager, and then later on. But certainly in those early years, it was kind of a perfect little melting pot, and everything just fit in place. And I was the kid running around with their inflatable aliens saying, if I just think hard enough, I can see a ghost, or I can have this premonition. I really didn't do myself any favors in school. I'll tell you that for nothing.
Awesome. So, I mean, how obviously, with the paranormal, this sort of industry, for a lot of people, it's a hobby. It's what we do in our spare time. So, going from that weird kid to all the TV shows you've done, all the work you've done, how did you get there? I guess, was it just the hard work? Was it your kind of focus going through like school and university, or did it come a bit later to actually do this as much as you do now?
I think I'd always kept my interests in, like, certainly in terms of like investigation or anything active like that, as quite separate from my work. So I did the undergrad thing, and then I ended up going into work, and then after that I needed to sort of get my head sorted together, and I started doing postgraduate qualifications. And it was throughout that I could really lean into my love of 19th century Gothic. So I've always loved the Victorians. I've always loved the age of sensation literature. Sorry, I live near a lot of country roads. There's a lot of tractors. Sorry if you can hear anything. So I'm just a nerd. I've always been a really big geek, and not in a cool way. And so through going back into university and having this space to fully immerse myself in the Victorian era and the Gothic, that then laid paths for me to say, well, you know what, I can really look into spiritualism now, and I can really academically interrogate spiritualism in these contexts and try and make everything a little more highbrow than I have been before. And so from that, I never thought, going back to uni, that I'd say, you know what, I'm going to go on TV and I'm going to scream in a mirror and I'm going to talk to Jonathan Ross about ghosts. Like, no, I mean, fair play to you if that's what you want to think and you want to say to yourself, but everything, I've always just followed my interests, and I've always had really intense obsessions where I have to know everything about something. So that led to me just having all this knowledge and not really knowing what to do with it. So I started doing talks while I was also working at a cemetery. Um, so it all just led from that. I got to talks, and then I got more and more involved in the communal side of the paranormal instead of doing everything kind of a bit hush hush and on my own. And yeah, one thing led to another, and I started writing commercially about the paranormal, and then some different opportunities started cropping up, and I've always been a grafter. I wish I could say things have always dropped into my lap. Be lovely if they had, but I've just worked my arse off, and if an opportunity comes along, I've given it a good go, and I've yeah, then found myself doing bits of paranormal TV, and so then when I was able to become a paranormal historian, that would be my dream job as a child. That would absolutely be, if you know, that, or pirate, something like that. That it would have been the absolute dream. So I'm really happy with the weird space that I find myself in. But I can't say that this was some great divine plan. I've always just worked at my weird interests and wanted to tell everyone about them. I'm a bit like if you take a toddler to the beach and they get like a weird dead jellyfish on a spade and they just want to come after you going, look at this cool thing I found. I'm like that, but bigger, and with ghosts. So my attitudes haven't really changed over over many decades.
So, just wanting to pick up on something that you mentioned a moment ago. You said that you had some paranormal experiences as you sort of were growing up. What were they, and did they sort of reinforce the kind of journey for you into the weird and wonderful that is the paranormal?
Yeah, I had. This is the thing. I'd like to say that these experiences sort of galvanized my view on the paranormal, and I feel like I should be saying that they did, but they kind of threw me off a bit. So this was when I was in my early teens. I spent a lot of time at my sister's house. My time was split a lot. I slept at my sister's house quite a lot, and she'd just moved into this ordinary, like, post-war semi-detached house in Grimsby. It wasn't some grand Gothic manor or anything, and we just started having these strange experiences in the house. We started hearing this. I mean, this is condensing years of activity, but we started um, seeing these big slashes of light at all hours of the day that moved like intelligently, like people, up and down the stairs and across the landing. We smelt burning in the house. Things moved independently. We'd have like a cutlery drawer just upended and placed throughout the house. And things started escalating where we would hear, and this still, all these years later, it still makes me feel a bit manky. But we used to hear footsteps that would go up and down the stairs and onto the landing, doing this little circuit, and it would do it every night. This wasn't some spooky 3 o'clock in the morning. It was every night for ages, for hours and hours and hours. You just hear these footsteps. And my sister's dog, who was a little Westie, would sit at the top of the stairs and watch something that we couldn't see. And so my bedroom faced out onto the top of the landing, and so I had prime view of this. And she'd just watch it for hours and growl at it and interact with it. And so that went on for the longest time. But ultimately, things did escalate, and we started seeing this figure in the house that was kind of like, the only way I've ever been able to describe it is like a man made of black static. Like when the edges of something are all crackly and they're not formed properly. And we just start seeing this, like, part of someone going into a room, Or one day we saw this sort of half a man sort of hanging above the shower, and it was all just this black figure of a man. And ultimately, we both ended up, my sister and her husband and myself, we both ended up seeing him fully, like a real man, like a full man, appeared in our bedrooms. And it's clear as day, as clear as I'm seeing you now. It was a real person. And I mean, fortunately for me, because I'd been saying for ages before my sister sort of said, yeah, there is something going on. I was saying, there's something wrong with this house. There's something wrong with this house. There's someone in the house. And eventually, when they both were fully awake, sat in bed, and this man was stood at the end of the bed, they said, there's something wrong with this house. So after that, I didn't really have a choice on not being there because of just how life was, but I was able to spend a lot more time with my grandparents. But ultimately, we went in pairs to the loo. You know, there was so much going on. It was really horrible, and I ended up sort of leaving that situation. And my sister and her husband, they had to move downstairs. They brought the mattress downstairs and lived out of the living room while they tried to sell the house, because it was, you know, they were trying to renovate this house, and you can't really sell it once you've bought this house, ripped half of it out, and you've got wallpaper hanging off the walls. So yeah, that whole thing was, it was really horrible, and I only started talking about it again about 4 years ago, about 3 or 4 years ago, um, because I certainly felt at the time that when I came out of that, it was like, this isn't fun anymore. This isn't like the ghosts in my books. This isn't like the stories I read. This is real, and it's scary, and it's sort of ruining my life. Um, and so it didn't really galvanize my interest in the paranormal. It sort of separated it again. It separated into real world paranormal, very unsafe, don't like it. But reports of other people's experiences and books and things like that were sort of safer. So yeah, I've had a really funny relationship with those experiences for a long time, and I still do. I've spoken to my sister about it quite a lot recently, and how it affected us both long term. But yeah, it's, I mean, what do you do with that experience? This was back in the day before I'd know what to do, who to contact, or, you know, people today would, you know, chew off their right arm to investigate a case like that. I think even probably I would. But when you're in it and you don't know about that, and you're just in the middle of, you know, 2000s, early 2000s Grimsby, you're not thinking, I'm going to contact the SPR. You think, I'm going to call a local vicar and see what happens. You know, so those were kind of the most intense experiences. And they were I've never had an experience while investigating the paranormal that has been as frightening as intense as that. And I feel quite fortunate about that in a way. Yeah.
It's mad because I think for a lot of people, that type of stuff will probably scare them away
Mm.
from. Because I think a lot of people like the subject, probably not as much now, but still does have that kind of part of the kind of mainstream that do ridicule it a little bit. Like you say, you're gonna go on
Mm.
paranormal investigations, you get that, the raised eyebrows and a bit, oh, looking for cast votes, little comments like that. I think a
Yeah.
lot of people don't want to, just because it's the unknown. It's kind of don't want to think about it because they don't want to know
Yeah.
if it's something they can't explain. I guess for you to kind of have them experiences, that probably seems to drive you more into it rather than away from it, especially from being young as well. That's quite a good
Yeah.
thing, I think.
Yeah. I think it gives a good groundwork of what
Mm.
it can be like, I suppose. But yeah, I mean, it's the power of hindsight, isn't it? If it was happening now, I'd say I'd have a completely different approach to things. Maybe I wouldn't. Maybe I will see. We'll see what happens. Maybe the next house I live in will be filled with 1,000 poltergeists, and I'll end up living in the shed or something.
So, do you think, going back to that experience quickly, you mentioned that there's renovation works going on. Now, a lot of hauntings seem to escalate, and you mentioned it was escalating. Do you feel that whilst this work was going on, that was like a conduit for this paranormal activity escalating?
Yeah, yeah. I think it was definitely a trigger because it seemed to be that whenever that the house never felt right. So from the start, it never felt like a welcoming, normal house. From the off, it felt like, oh, I don't like this. I don't want to be in this place alone. And I've only had that feeling in a handful of places. But it was certainly when the wallpaper, the first lot of wallpaper in the hallway started coming off, that's when the lights started. And it did seem that when more major, I say major renovations, there was nothing being rebuilt. It was fully just like stripping, sorting out the electrics, renovating everything. Because of course, a lot of people reach for, well, did you have the gas checked? Did you have the electrics checked? It's like, well, my sister's husband at the time was a gas engineer. Like that was his job, and his mates were all Sparkies. So the full house was had like all the certificates you could possibly want. But yeah, it certainly seemed that the further the redecorating and the renovations progressed, the more intense things got. But when you're living in like a really tatty house, you can't really say, "Oh, I'll live with this because the ghost doesn't like it." We never even called it a ghost. We just said the funny house, the weird house, the man in the house. We never called it what we describe it as now. But yeah, one interesting thing about that though is before my sister bought it, the house was rented, and it was this bloke and his family bought it, and then they lived in it for about 3 months. And then they left. They left at night, in the middle of the night. They did like a midnight flit, and then started renting it out. And no tenant stayed for more than 6 months for quite a few years. But then after we left that house, the people that moved in. Now I only know this because I'm a nosy sod, and I've driven past it a lot. The people that moved in didn't redecorate until I think it was last year. So they kept everything the same.
Wow,
So I don't know. I don't know what's going on there now, but yeah.
that's mad. That's
Mm,
mad. Um, yeah, I think, like you said, now my situation, like into the paranormal heavily. Me and Ash do the podcast. We do all the live streams and that.
mm.
It's kind of like that's like a unicorn kind of location. It's like
Yeah,
that'd be amazing, but I can only imagine the horror when
yeah.
you're there yourself and you're in it, especially if, like, at that time the internet was quite a young thing back in the
Mm,
early 2000s, wasn't it? I mean,
yeah.
so it wasn't even like, I remember back then I wouldn't have, I would have probably, I did look for UFO videos and stuff, but that was about as far as I went on the internet for ghosts and stuff. So I don't know
Yeah. I
where
mean
you would
this
even go. Mm,
yeah, this was really early in the days of Most Haunted as well. So there wasn't really an awful lot of we weren't exposed to a lot of paranormal entertainment as well.
no, no,
Um
and
but
that kind of
yeah.
entertainment probably doesn't put you in a good frame of mind for the
Oh
paranormal,
no,
with like a
no.
Vet Fielding screaming her head off and running around going, I'm going to be like possessed or whatever.
Yeah, maybe
So,
that's why we could still watch it while we're in the house. It was like, oh, this is completely different to
mm,
what we're going
yeah,
through. But yeah,
yeah,
yeah, we did get a local vicar in, and the deliverance team came to bless the house. And the first time they did it, because this was after things got really, really bad, and there was bangs and all hours, and there were these things appearing, lights everywhere. It was just relentless. It was really extreme. And when the vicar and the team came, it stayed really quiet, and the house felt completely different for probably about a week. Because when it first happened, it was like, and it's done. It's done. Everything's fine. You can feel the change. People talk about, you feel the atmosphere lift, and it did. It really did. Felt like a new house, and my sister was so relieved as well. But then when it restarted up again, it was like all hell broke loose. It was horrific. They came back to try and bless it. It lasted a day, and then it was worse than ever. And that's when I scarpered. But yeah, the deliverance team came round twice, and I wasn't in the house when it happened. But my sister was there, who was just sat on, because we're not a particularly religious family. We weren't then. That changed a lot of us. Me and my sister went really intensely religious after that, but prior to that we weren't. But yeah, she just sat on the sofa thinking, "There's a vicar in my house, and all these people are chucking holy water everywhere. What on earth has happened to my life? I used to be normal." So yeah, it's a full experience. It's something that I kind of struggle to marry with um, a lot of paranormal experiences I have today. Certainly.
So, kind of talking about that, the post kind of things, and spiritualism, and the Victorian era, which is obviously you have the massive interest in.
Mm.
What kind of, 'cause obviously in that time was kind of when spiritualism kind of became quite popular.
Yeah,
What was it about that era that kind of made it? Like, with obviously you started having like seances and these things that kind of
yeah.
came out of that. What was it about that era that kind of brought it up?
That caused spiritualism to happen, or just
Yeah,
why is it a
yeah.
brilliant era? 'Cause I
Well,
can answer
both, I
both.
guess. But both, I guess. Yeah, it kind of
Yeah,
became popular, like spiritualism round
yeah.
in that time.
Um, well, I think spiritualism could only have happened in the 19th century. I believe that anyway. So spiritualism um, sort of was born in 1848, and it was born in America with the Fox sisters. But it happened arguably because there were such enormous developments in industry, in religion, in all aspects of Western culture at this time. So within 100 years, we had massive population changes, we had increased literacy, we had these amazing industrial changes that completely reshaped our landscapes, but also they reshaped how we consumed media, how we consumed news, and how we communicated new ideas with one another. So when spiritualism came about, it was in the middle of this tumultuous religious period where we started having quite interesting ideas coming over from Europe, about animal magnetism and mentalism, and the possibilities of the human body, and this sort of unseen, what should we say? I'm trying to not use really manky language because some of it makes me feel a bit sick. These like unseen forces that are in all of us, like life force. There we go, life force. Because yeah, in some places they called it like vitric fluid, and fluid just makes me feel a little bit. But anyway, there were all these new ideas about what it meant to be human, ideas about immortality, and obviously when there were huge changes in how people interpreted the natural world, we started questioning the nature of God, and what we'd in the Christian context, and what we'd previously considered to be just how things were. And then when spiritualism came along, it confirmed that there was an afterlife. And if you believed everything that happened at these seances and these lectures, it proved that the human spirit not only existed, but it had the ability and the inclination to return and communicate with us. Because it made perfect sense, because we just had so many different new communicative methods. We had like the telegraph. So if you can communicate a method, like a message over miles and miles and miles, well, it stands to reason that we should get a message up north, up that way, up to heaven. So everything kind of made sense, and it spread so quickly because of the periodical press or the magazine presses. So I think we kind of think of magazines as just always being there. They're just a thing that's part of the human experience, but we didn't really have magazines and special interest magazines. And this is like more, religious, financial, news-based magazines, not just mucky mags. These special interest magazines came about because of this printing press, and because so many people were now literate that weren't before, and they could get these affordable little magazines that said, you know what's happening in the States, these people are communicating with spirits. And so that's how these ideas were able to spread like wildfire, and they came over to the UK. The idea of spiritualism and mediums came over to the UK in the 1850s, and then it just never left. It spread roots all over the place, particularly in the north. And yeah, spiritualism never left. But I think it's a fascinating thing. I think it's a wonderful thing that a new religion was born in the 19th century and perpetuated by young women. I think it's a fantastic, fascinating history, and it informs so much of our modern paranormal investigation methods and the way we speak about ghosts, the way we speak about spirits and spirit communication. It's all just we're all just nicking it from the Victorians. We're not doing anything new. We're just the same people, but with more gadgets.
It's interesting that um, some probably some of the younger people in the paranormal
Mm,
don't realize that people used to have seances. People used to just go round to each other's houses
mm,
and have a seance at a
yeah,
weekend and such like, and take part in this entertainment.
mm,
Essentially, they would start trying to communicate with the people who had passed over and get results from it.
mm,
Um, um, I, I've listened to podcasts and whatnot on the Fox sisters and spiritualism, and I find, and it's a conversation that I have um, with friends and um, with Ash, and where it's like, why don't we go back to those methods, because they're like innocent in terms of then
mm,
it's not being clouded by technology. It's
yeah,
kind of raw. It's stuff that people can do, like having a seance or sitting around a table and trying to communicate with the dead, or whatever the
mm,
entity is. It is fascinating that compared to nowadays, where I can go on a mobile phone and essentially ChatGPT can give me all these answers and
yeah,
pretend to be a spirit if I wanted it to. Whereas
mm,
back then, people were fully invested into this new, like you say, this wave following like the industrial revolutions, and then Ouija boards came out and they became like one of the best selling toys of all time. I say toy,
yeah,
but people used to have them, they just buy
yeah,
them.
yeah.
Um,
They're a novelty.
yeah, they were naughty, and they took over the world, and they had like factories everywhere printing these Ouija boards or
Mm,
spirit boards. Um,
yeah,
I think it was a fascinating time, and the history of like the spirit board as well, where they had to prove the technology in the patent office, and people probably don't know about this, and they got it to spell out the person's name in there,
yeah,
and the guy's like, okay, you can have a patent for
yeah,
that.
yeah. It's
And
it's fascinating history.
it's insane. So compared to where we are now with all this technology, do you think we should be looking more at the olden day methods of investigating? Because obviously that's an area you're invested in, but is it
Yeah,
something we should be doing as part of modern day investigations, looking at times before us?
yeah. I certainly think that I think what we need to do with investigations, just to mix things up a bit. I think everyone can do whatever they want,
Mm,
investigation style, if whatever works for them. I think it's a very personal process and a personal experience. And I'm not going to go up to someone and say, "You're not allowed cat balls." It's just whatever you want. But I have found more recently, I'm not sure about you, that a lot of events companies advertise authentic Victorian seances. We're doing an authentic Victorian investigation, and there are nods to it, and I can completely understand why they do it this way, where there'll be things like we'll do table tipping, we'll do a séance with a medium, a trance medium at the centre, we'll do some kind of rudimentary Ouija board or automatic writing process, um, and they're all recognisable facets of Victorian spirit contact. But I think when we look back at seance reports, and there are so many seance reports in Victorian magazines, I think some of the to do an authentic Victorian seance, free from any grand manifestations, where you would have to have someone fraudulent there. Um, the best way of doing that would be to have everyone completely on the same page. So no one just thinking, "Oh, this is an interesting thing I could have a go at." To really do it properly, you need everyone to be so fully invested and believing in it. And most importantly, this is what I think trips up most people when they try and do authentic Victorian seances, is the Victorians opened their seances with hymns and with songs. And no one in any paranormal group that I have ever been near, sniffed, been within the vague vicinity of, has said, you know what, I feel really comfortable singing hymns around all of these people really loudly. So I think our own egos stop us from singing, hymnals. But also, if you ask the average man on the street, would he know an appropriate spiritualist hymn? He'd know the first verse of All Things Bright and Beautiful, and then wander off. So there are certain elements of the traditional seance which would require a bit of prep beforehand, or at least some little handouts. So I feel like that would be quite an interesting. That would be. I'd love that. I would adore seeing a team get fully into it, fully blasting out some like Baptist hymnals or something, and then doing a séance.
Let's do it. Let's get it
Yeah.
sorted.
Do you
I mean,
think
I don't know
books
any
out.
hymns. And
we can
All
have some,
Things
we
Bright and
can have some
Beautiful.
singing
That's about as
lessons?
much as I...
Go for some singing lessons, Greg.
What?
We can go for some singing lessons.
I don't need any singing lessons.
Oh, I do. I'll be so out of key. It'll be probably scare the
Doesn't-
spirits away.
Doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. You're putting out that good-ish energy, so the spirits will know what to tap into.
I'll start singing and things would start levitating and that on their own because
Well,
I'll be
they
singing
are.
in some kind of weird language.
They are. You see, even if you summon some undead beastie from the netherworld, you've still got some evidence at the end of it.
Yeah. I'll have forgotten to press record on the camera as well.
Yeah,
That'll be my
well,
problem.
that is always the way, isn't it?
Kind of in a similar vein, I guess. Do you think going to these old buildings, like Victorian buildings that have had a lot of history and stuff of ghosts or whatever activity? Because some people say, or some people try, where they wear sort of period clothing. So is that something that you've looked into or sort of found that if you kind of get into that era yourself, that you're more likely to get?
I really like it as an investigative style. Because also it's a bit of a novelty. I mean, so much paranormal investigation is spent, in darkness with a flask and a fleece. So for starters, it's just nice to see people in something other than that. And so it adds a bit of a novelty to the investigation period. And I would never knock a flask of tea because I would be dead were it not for a good kettle on some investigations. But I do think I've been on quite a few investigations where we've done that, where we've worn period appropriate clothing. I did some one down in Bridgewater a couple of years ago that was really interesting, and it does seem that if you have something, if you focus your investigation, so it would involve a lot of planning. So if you were dressed to a specific era and you focused your investigation to the language of that era, the people you'd want to contact from the era, do like mega precise, I think you can get some really interesting responses because you're not just casting a really wide net, you're really honing things down. And I suppose in theory, if you were a spirit and you wanted to look for something familiar and sort of safe, then someone that you would recognize as being from your time or from your culture would be a good place to start. And I know they're doing a lot of that. There's a Bath costume hire down in the southwest are working with paranormal teams at the minute, and South Bristol Paranormal as well. They've done a lot with doing these dressed up investigations, and they've got some really great responses. But yeah, it does require you to sometimes wear a bustle or a top hat, which can't be a bad thing. I'm fully supportive of that.
So I guess you to join us on our next TikTok. We'll be wearing top hats, coattails, and singing hymns. From tune in for that. Make sure you donate when we do that.
I'll be so
It's interesting,
disappointed if you don't. Yeah.
We'll try. Interestingly, we went to the Priest's Cottage in Leeds just over a week ago. It's a new location that
That's Victorian as well, isn't it?
Victoria. And weirdly, we did play hymns, didn't we? Got the Bluetooth speaker and went on Spotify, and I said to Ash, let's just put some choir singing on. And I don't know if that helped or anything, but Yeah, we got some interesting results there. So who knows?
Yeah, I think playing music, especially in investigations, like time appropriate music, even if you're going back to Tudor buildings or abbeys or anything like that, you can get some really interesting responses if you tap into the right music. I've certainly had some weird things with a lot of Latin in the past, which is great. I mean, some good responses and EVPs, which would be really, really helpful if my Latin was any good. But it is, I'm impressing no one's dad with that level of Latin. It's not happening.
I'm from a time where they taught Latin at my secondary school.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
that old.
Mine as well.
Oh,
At
okay.
mine as well. Yeah, we did. It was Latin and classical
Wow.
civilizations,
Oh,
and I
and
can
if
remember
you,
so little.
I can't remember it, but looking back, I wish I had because
Mm,
it would have served me a lot better now. Um,
yeah,
but if you'd have seen where my school was and the type of people who went to my school, I'm surprised Latin was even just
yeah.
reading and writing was probably more important than Latin. So what would you so on your investigations,
Mm,
excuse me, what have you had that you've gone I know you've had the stuff when you were growing up, but
mm,
you've gone on an investigation, you've gone, that is absolute, in my mind, absolute
mm.
proof that that was intelligent, that was an
Yeah,
intelligent response, or that was some evidence that you can say that's it for me.
yeah. I'd say the best experience I've had with intelligent responses probably a couple of years ago was at Warmley Clock Tower, which is I think it's just outside of Bristol. I'm mentioning Bristol a lot at the minute. I don't live in Bristol, but yeah, it was in Warmley Clock Tower, and as per usual, it was before any cameras were turned on, anything like that. So lessons were learned, I suppose, about that. But there were just three of us, and we're all women, and we used a geophone or a footstep tracker, and we just had it on this table upstairs where the manufacturing of pins would have been in the 19th century. And we, a few of us had investigated there before and knew that there was this sort of overbearing male spirit that was thought to be sort of the foreman equivalent of the factory. And we just sat there and said in very, very polite language that we were women and we wanted to talk to a very kind gentleman about his work here, and really hammed it up because when you get in the mood, why not? And after a while we started saying, if so and so's here, can you tap once for yes, twice for no, the most basic stuff in the book. And suddenly it started happening, but so clear on this table, none of us were touching it, like all of us were completely hands off. And we started having this amazing back and forth communication about his work, and that he didn't want women there, and that he was frustrated with the way the building was being used. And it got quite angry, and it started getting quite intense on the table. We started getting these really loud and very brightly flashing responses. And that happened. It must have been for about 15 minutes. It was a really long time. And then the people arrived that we were meant to be recording stuff with. And we'd just had some amazing stuff happen upstairs. Come and watch this. And they were blokes. Came up. Are you still there? Can you do that? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. But for those 15 minutes, there was nothing that was scary about it, apart from the fact that it was very clear and it was clearly very intelligent. But yeah, that was brilliant. That was really good. That sort of compounded everything in my head. Like, oh no, this you're not losing your mind. There is something there, and it is intelligent. Yeah, so I think that's probably the best because it was the most sustained. But I've had little, snippets of things years since.
Kind of talking about ghosts, and in this building itself, this is a Victorian building. Doing research on this building because we've had some weird things happen. Um, Information we've been able to find is, I believe, there's an entity or ghost or whatever from a guy that lived here in 1901, which is getting towards the end of the Victorian
Hmm.
era. I seem to find, or I think generally, you see a lot of, seems to be a lot more ghost reports that kind of feature Victorian. Like they say, it's all very Victorian dress or Victorian girls or whatever. Is that something that you found where there's sort of a skew towards reported ghosts, especially in the media, that
Yeah.
or like you seem to be like from that era, rather than like more modern ghosts or even like going like previous to that to maybe 500 years ago? It's more seems to be reports of seeing figures or people dressed as if it's from that period. Is that something that you've found?
Yeah.
And it is the
Yeah.
reason because that rise in that time, is that the reason why you're still seeing that today?
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. Every time you move, there's a Victorian chimney sweep. There's not like Debbie from 1982, is there? There are always someone like in a grand bustle going through hallways. I don't know. See, I've changed my mind on that a lot. I think a lot of it is down to misidentification of eras. So I think what we see as like an oldie worldy Victorian dress could actually be attributed to several hundred years. So I've seen people attribute Tudor dress to the Victorian era just because it's oldie worldy. So I think maybe that might be an element of it, that we are getting a greater variety of spirits, but not everyone's going to be a clothing historian and someone's just going to say big old dress, definitely Victorian, instead of oh no, it was Regency, it was, you know. So I think maybe that's an element of it. But also maybe we're missing a lot of modern ghosts. Maybe if you do see, you know, a bloke in a baseball cap outside your window, you're going to think it's more of a nosy neighbour. You're not going to think, oh, the undead. So, yeah, I think there's elements of that. But yeah, perhaps because the Victorian era was such a... If you think that spirits are bound to buildings, especially, or yeah, bound to locations, a lot of our buildings were built in the mid to late 19th century. And so, yeah, perhaps the first people that lived there, people that had very intense experiences there or built there or emotionally linked to those places. So I don't know. I think there are many threads you could take with that one. But yeah, if I see one more, you know, white grey lady in a bustle wandering down a hallway, or someone channeling a Victorian urchin who comes through with "all right, governor," I think I'm just going to scream.
What do you think makes a haunted location? And the reason I ask that is that me and Ash, like yourself, we've written a book about.
Amazing.
Yeah. Oh, we're proud of it, aren't we, Ash? And it was so we done a series where we went for the podcast where we chose a different state each week. So we've got all the states, and we've done a book to accompany it as well. Where we noticed that a lot of locations where there's been a lot of trauma, a lot of I don't know what the word is, a lot of
Like horrible things happening.
horrible things happening. Yeah, trauma, horrible things happening. A lot of intense emotions. That's it. I get told I don't have many emotions. That's why I'm struggling with that word. Do you think that causes a location to be haunted, or in your experience, is there anything else that might cause a location to be linked specifically with hauntings?
Yeah. I do think that intense emotions, not just trauma, although trauma is arguably the most intense of all, but just intense moments of fear or um, maybe not so much joy, maybe not so much positive ones, but that might be because I'm a dyed in the wool pessimist. But certainly extreme emotions, I think, can leave an imprint on a place and not necessarily have to have someone die as a result of that. I think a lot of places are haunted by a feeling that sort of got stuck into the brickwork like chewing gum, you know. So I've stayed in. See, I think I might have caused a haunting. Now this makes me sound absolutely mental, which is a big thing to say when this is my job. But
Welcome to the podcast, if you are.
but right, I stayed in this. It was like a God, what was it? It was probably built in the what should I say, 1920s. This 1920s building in Graz in Austria many years ago now, and it just had a funny feeling. There was a lot of trauma there related to what happened during wartime. The woman that lived there basically fled the house, got on a bike, and rode to the border to escape. So it was really, really intense. And I woke up one night and I saw these people. But I used to have a lot of problems with like night terrors and stuff like that. I woke up and I saw these people that had like scribbled eyes and things like that that were just talking. You know, when you rewind a tape and it sounds like it was like that. And so naturally, I just went loopy and was screaming and clawing at things. And then I came to my senses, and then it was like, okay, I'll go to sleep. I'll get back in the morning. The people below me, I will apologise to them in the morning. But after that, the feeling in that room was so intense. And I went and stayed in the same building years afterwards. And the feeling that was stuck in that room after I'd had my funny do was so palpable that it wasn't there before, but it was thereafter, and it stayed a long time. So I was thinking perhaps my really extreme reaction, and it was extreme, like I could have really caused damage back then. And yeah, did that leave a lasting impression? Did I inadvertently cause a haunting that's not of a dead person? And I suppose that feeds into a lot of like ESP stuff and a lot of parapsychological theories of the turn of the century of thought transference and the living being able to influence immovable objects. So yeah, perhaps there's an element of that, but I do think that um, apart from that little detour I took that, to cause a haunting, they don't have to be dead. It can be an intense feeling, but I think sometimes people are just so happy in their houses that they don't want to leave, and so they just stay there, or they refuse to accept that they're dead, and so they just hang about getting annoyed. Um, and I don't necessarily believe that all hauntings are the result of intelligent human spirits. I think there's it's like if you walked through a forest and then walked across a white carpet, you'd leave lots of stuff. I think life's kind of like that. We can be haunted by so many different things, and we can create our own ghosts, which isn't a very neat answer. I'm sorry about that.
No, that's cool, because one of my thoughts around poltergeist activity is the manifestation, like it's the emotional turmoil that whoever, teenagers particularly, and
Mm,
prepubescent teenagers, they can manifest this
yeah.
entity um, out of their inner turmoil,
Mm,
basically, that they essentially create this manifestation,
yeah.
and from there it feeds on. And there's reports of people creating entities. There's a very famous, I can't remember the spirit's name, that they created this backstory for this spirit, and then it all started
Oh yeah, yeah,
to
yeah,
I can't think. We did a video on it,
yeah.
Ash, and I can't even remember what the thing's called. But there is that you can manifest these things.
Mm,
So from you saying about that experience in Graz, that why is that not possible? Why does
mm,
it have to be a spirit of a dead person? Why
yeah,
is it not the spirit of a living person that stays in that location for whatever reason? So that's quite, that takes that whole paranormal thing down a different route as well, which
yeah,
is,
yeah.
we're talking about how did you pass over, and you might not get any responses because
Because
that emotion, that trigger is still in the room, hasn't passed.
mm, yeah,
So
yeah. After all, it's all energy, isn't it?
mhm.
I just keep
So
picturing
Todd,
the Ghosts BBC show and all the different ghosts
oh
from
yeah,
Yeah.
different eras in the in the thing. I was wanting to ask a little bit about, because obviously we talked about cemeteries at the very top of the show,
Mm,
and we do a bit of TikTok lives and cemeteries and stuff. It seems to be really popular,
Mhm.
and it's mainly because it's somewhere it's free, it's easy, it's quick.
Mhm.
Like jumping over the caretaker's fence, but doesn't see you, so it's fine. Do you think that a cemetery type they worthwhile places to investigate? Or
You know what? I am the single worst person in the world that you could ask about investigating cemeteries. You really are. It's like, ask me about my formative romantic experiences as a teenager. Ask me about problems I've got with my feet. Whatever you do, don't. Like I oh God, I've written a paper previously about paranormal investigators and cemeteries, and there's a lot of legal and ethical issues that arise from investigating in cemeteries that affect both the cemetery trust, the cemetery charities, and investigators themselves, because there's so many pitfalls on either side. Broadly, I'd say I completely understand why people do it, because first of all, you've got the visual. So, especially if you're using like a typical 19th century cemetery, because cemeteries didn't exist prior to the 19th century, really. So you've already got that Gothic background. People know straight off where you are, what you're doing. There's the death association, there's the horror association, because some prominent Victorian cemeteries in London were used as literal horror backgrounds in Hammer films in the 1970s. Cemeteries equal death, death equals dead people equal ghosts. I get it completely. But at the same time, there's a lot of issues with like legalities with land ownership and plot ownership. Like, if you want to be the most dull lawyer in the world, get into cemetery plots, because there's the ownership over the site versus over the plot is an absolute it's a quagmire of conflicting laws. But it got very, very popular to do that over lockdown, because they were like you say, perceived public spaces where people can access them readily. Although you talk about vaulting fences, I mean, you're far more athletic than I am. Yeah. Well, okay. Well, yeah, I can understand why people do it, but personally, it's not my bag at all, at all. But again, I can understand why people do it. I'm not going to beat you around the head about it, but
that's fair. I mean, we've had people like come on the TikToks when we've done it and say like it's disrespectful.
mm,
Shouldn't be there. Let them rest, things like that, which
yeah,
totally get. And totally, obviously, we don't do it in a disrespectful way, in my opinion. But I also
yeah,
kind of think that in the daytime, like lots of people come
mm,
and they're walking on the same paths that we're walking on. They're visiting the
mhm.
graves or whatever they're doing. So why is it different just because it's at night time? We're still
I suppose it's
visiting.
intent. It's intent, isn't it? And like the word disrespectful, I hate the word respect, and I really hate the word disrespectful, because it's like it's something that you can just use to beat people with. It can mean completely different things. Like what I would deem as disrespectful to me, someone else would just say, "What the hell are you on about?" So yeah, I don't like that as a term. But I think that there can be issues if, like, I've seen people do investigations where they just pick quite a modern grave and will put their equipment on that grave and then just focus on that. And so I think one of the big issues with doing it is that recognizable aspect, that if you just pick, especially a fresh grave, I mean, bloody hell, um, and that person's full epitaph is visible, that can cause. I think that's just risky. I think that's quite yeah. Again, it's not particularly ethical to do that, because again, you just think. I mean, regardless of the dead, you've got to think of the living in that respect, haven't you? That you wouldn't want. Um, like, certainly, if I saw a paranormal investigator doing an investigation on my grandparents' grave, for example, I would find out where they lived in a heartbeat, and they would be getting a visit. So I think there's as much as the aesthetics are good, there's definitely a middle ground where you should be very aware of modern burials and that recognizable aspect as well. I think that's while I might not be a fan of the whole idea, I certainly think just stay off modern graves. Those people are like the living. They're probably still grieving. So
That's
it's
fair.
it's
That's a
worth
fair point.
steering clear.
I know when we've ever gone out, we never show the names on
Mm,
graves. We particularly sort of point. We don't really. We always stick to paths. We don't
mm.
not. We don't do an investigation on it. We just a
It's
lot
like
of the
the
time we're just
area.
walking. We're walking around the paths and
Mm,
whatnot.
To be fair,
But
most
yeah,
of the results I've had of mine has been when it's like a great church graveyard at the actual church itself, rather than
mm.
Mhm.
like out
The
in the
church has
fields.
given us the most evidence,
Yeah.
knocking from inside and
Yeah. Well,
very
they were
weird stuff.
community hubs, weren't they?
Mm,
People have had the best days of their lives in there, the worst days of their lives.
mhm.
They're putting all their, they're worshipping every Sunday. Yeah, like someone might have grieved at a graveside temporarily, but people are in that church for centuries. So it would stand to reason that was more like a battery than anything else. Yeah.
So talk to us about the books you've got out. So we talked. You've got one in the works. For
Yes. Yeah.
so the date was next year.
Yes,
Is that
yeah. I haven't got a solid date yet from the publisher, but I think it's early next year. I get this lovely vague sort of at some point um, a guesstimate. But the book I've got out at the minute is Begotten, which is a Gothic novel, and it's a tale of scandal, lies, and seance. And yeah, it's my baby. It's my papery baby. It's my slow burning um, Gothic novel and sort of my love letter to Victorian spiritualism and the mad side of Victorian spiritualism. So the broad overview is that a woman returns home to this grand country house that she'd lived in with her family for years, just after a family member died. And she came home, and instead of finding the house as she left it, she's found out that some very, very charismatic spiritualists seem to have moved in who say that they can contact the deceased. And so it's the story of whether you can ever actually trust your senses and what ghosts actually are and the power of manipulation in the paranormal. And I'm really proud of it. I'm really proud of it. And I've had some really lovely um, and mad messages about it, with people saying, "Oh, I've binged it in a day," and people saying, "I love the book, but I have to vent to someone about this character. They're such an evil so and so. I keep thinking about what I want to, beat him with, and all of this." So it's been great. It's been really really fun, and I think because I didn't go down a particularly conventional route with the whole thing, I kind of wanted to do everything through a smaller publisher and through the paranormal community itself. It seems to have really found a home with it's found a home within the ghost hunters, which is something I'm really happy about. So yeah, people that don't normally pick up books and read a gothic novel, it seems to be a really great access point, and ironically a very popular summer read. So I would implore people to please go out and buy my book. I promise you it's very good.
we'll certainly put the links to it in the show notes. So don't worry about that.
Thank you.
Um,
And yeah, the next book
yeah,
is a non-fiction, and that's about graves. So you can take that on your investigations when it's out. But that's more about the unusual side of English burials. Yeah, an odd one, but that definitely came from my years of writing my blog. So
yeah.
I've run a blog called burialsandbeyond.com for years and years and years now. And from that, I visited so many weird graves, so many weird burial sites, and all manner of strange stories have cropped up. And then I got approached to, collate them all and make them
Awesome.
into a book. So I've been doing that, and I've been traveling all over the place, rinsing the rail network, visiting and rinsing friendships. I've had so many people. I've gone, "Do you live near here? Can I stay with you? I need to visit a dead guy." So it's been a job getting it done, but I'm looking forward to having that like be a
Amazing.
thing. But that'll be next
And you
year.
said that's next year. Yeah,
Yes,
next
yeah,
year.
it'll be next year.
One thing we haven't touched on really is the TV work you've done. I know we briefly mentioned it right at the start, and you worked with Jack Osborne.
Hmm.
And I think when I was doing my research in OK Magazine that you were in as well,
Yes.
that you said that Jack Osborne was like a really good paranormal investigator.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now I've watched some of his stuff,
Mm.
and I do like I
Mm.
quite like the guy. I mean, the whole family's mad as a box of
Yeah.
frogs. But how was that, and how did working with someone like Jack Osborne compare to working with someone like Jonathan Ross?
Mm.
Because
Um,
they strike me as quite different people, but probably quite similar as well.
yeah,
Because
they were both absolutely lovely. I mean, I did the first series of Homecoming in 22, and yeah, I was really impressed with Jack's investigative method. First of all, he's a really nice guy. He's a really nice person, proper family man. Like adores his kids beyond anything. He's very classy as well. I think I certainly learned a lot during that process. Um, but yeah, he's really is a very focused investigator. He likes his tech, and he had some amazing tech like Faraday cages and stuff. This amazing stuff that I thought might actually do like a second Chernobyl type deal. You know, they were pretty intense bits of kit. But he'd approach every investigation with a healthy skepticism as well. So when he did get something coming through, like a Mel meter or some piece of equipment, he was able to say, "Well, we've isolated it. Couldn't be this, and this." And he was very clear and very focused. He wasn't distracted or getting too daft about it. Whereas I obviously have a propensity of getting a little bit daft, but I'm allowed to because I'm a girl. But but I thought, yeah, Jack was a really great investigator, and had a clear vision as well about the the way he wanted to lead certain investigations, and I really respected that. It was a really great experience. Whereas, yeah, Jonathan was a completely different situation because he didn't have a paranormal background. He'd never been ghost bothering, as I call it, um, and he'd been quite an outspoken skeptic to a lot of paranormal things. His wife had done a very good series years ago, investigating various claims. But yeah, he never had that background. But he was so I can't put into words how nice he is. I really wish I had some like Hollywood, scandals to be like, oh, he's an asshole. He did this. No, one of the loveliest people I've ever worked with in
good.
normal work and in tele work. Genuinely lovely. Had time for everyone. And his approach to investigation was like he wasn't all in his skepticism. He wasn't so much like, oh, this is all nonsense. Nothing's going to happen. He had a really healthy attitude to it, which I think is something that we could all do with reapproaching ourselves, where it was, well, I'm not necessarily all bought into this, but I'm going in with an open mind, and if something happens, I'm just gonna follow it. I'm just gonna see what happens. I'm not gonna pick it apart too much. I'm just gonna go with the experience, and then afterwards, I'll see how I feel about things. And I think that openness led to some quite interesting investigations, because when you lay yourself vulnerable in an investigation, I often find like you get some quite interesting pieces of evidence, and you can use your body as a piece of investigative um, equipment as well. So when one of us started feeling a bit queasy or a bit off, we could address that and say, oh, okay, well, it could be this, it could be that. So let's approach that. So it was a really good experience because of the openness of the whole thing. And yeah, it was a right laugh. It was really fun. And he's a a good bloke. So they were both really good experiences, but different, being part of a team and then leading investigations. That was it was fun duality to it.
How did you find the crew and the camera crew?
Mm.
Were they into it at all? Were they literally there? They were more focused on obviously making sure that the shots were right now, but
Yeah.
did they have a healthy interest in the paranormal? Or
Yeah, no, they did. There were different directors to both of them, but both went in with the same approach of there were some great notes that were sent over where it was like, if something happens, just follow it, just see what happens. Don't try and reframe anything. Don't try and push it in a different direction. If something happens, these people know what they're doing, capture it. However small or insignificant you think something might be, it might not be something small and insignificant. And it's that attention to detail and trust in the cast, as it were, that helped capture some really interesting things. Certainly, some hits we had with a medium in the first series. We wouldn't have had those if the director hadn't said, "Does that mean anything to anyone?" and then immediately put the cameras on a cameraman who it matched perfectly. So I think that attitude from the crew was kind of invaluable as well. So when there were weird happenings, they weren't just being quiet and saying, "Oh, it's just this, it's just that." They'd be saying, "I don't know if this is important. I don't know if this is anything, but this has just happened." So all together, we were kind of moving as a unit. And filming an investigation for telly is completely different to a paranormal investigation outside of that, because you're expected to cram in what, like 5, 6, 7 hours of investigation into like a shooting time that would probably be maximum an hour per investigation, and then you'd have to move around. Sometimes you get like half an hour. Now, any one of us normally would be like, "Well, I'm not. What am I going to do?" You just panic. But that's the thing. You have to have really clear ideas of what would work best for certain investigations. And sometimes you just need to lob loads of equipment at something and think, if there's a spirit there, if this doesn't capture it, nothing will. And yeah, so it's a lot of thinking on your feet and a lot of drawing on experience as well. I think if you were going into that having not really done an awful, not a wide variety of investigations, you would be really panicking by day one. Yeah.
It's interesting you say about they're trying to condense it down into a very small
Mm.
time frame. We spoke to a guy from Seattle, I think he was, Keith Linder, and he had a Bothell Hell House, this property was, and Ghost Adventures rocked up and they've done an episode there and
Yeah.
captured nothing.
Mm.
And they basically were trying to make out that it wasn't a haunted location and whatnot.
Yeah.
And he was telling us that they literally rocked up. They were there for about 2 hours and then
Yeah.
went. He goes, so no wonder they didn't capture anything. But then
Mm.
he was frustrated because it made him look like
Yeah.
his story wasn't valid.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
how would did they sort of give an indication that, like, we're at this location, there has been activity here before, we haven't captured anything,
Mm-hmm.
we're gonna like bin it, or would they talk about putting it out still with no activity? Or
I think if there was nothing, no matter what you did, there'd have to be some very difficult conversations had there. I mean, I personally haven't been in that circumstance. Touch wood. But yeah, it's a tricky thing because you first of all, you are at the mercy of editors. You really are. But I suppose if you don't capture something with all of your methods, that's why I think you have to keep changing so often when you're doing any piece of filming. If you're not getting anything by calling out, it would be lovely to sit there for 2 hours waiting for something to happen. That's what I'd love to do, but you can't, because all of this is time and money. So if that doesn't work, sod it, put this in, combine these two things. It makes you really ingenious. You start treating paranormal equipment like Lego bricks. You just start going, oh well, I'll put a footstep tracker with with a millimeter, and we'll do this and we'll do this and we'll double up on everything. And it sort of makes you approach things differently. But I think the most frustrating thing is kind of the opposite of not getting any communications. One of the most frustrating things is when you start getting it. Like, we did an investigation of the Ragged School, and there's some really weird energy there. And we did a Ouija board session, and we started getting some really interesting messages come through. We had this door that kept opening, and Ian and I were thinking, oh God, we should stay here for much longer. We should do this, but we couldn't. That was the time that we had there. So there's a lot of stories that you have to leave sort of unfinished. And then conversely as well, whenever anything comes out, you'll always have a friend saying to you, well, why didn't you say this? Why didn't you do this? Why didn't you do this? Even when I've appeared as a historian or something on telly, people say, oh, why didn't you mention this? And you just have to say to these people, I did, and it got cut. Generally, you film for weeks and weeks to get, a couple of hours of telly. Or you'd film, I filmed for 2 days for basically what was less than 10 minutes of telly earlier this year. So, you can't really be precious over these things. You just have to treat it as a completely different beast to paranormal investigation itself.
Yeah, it's quite scary in a way because we've done bits and bobs, but I'm in talks with a production company for a big show. That's one of the biggest on TV, like in 2024. It's obviously things happen in TV and pre-production and stuff doesn't always
Yeah.
happen. It's not going to mention anything, any names or anything in public, but it's like, and they talk about stuff that they want me or UFO Identified to do is like to be leading this part of this episode of this show. I'm just even now, it's like nothing's been like signed or anything yet, but it's like still got that anxiety of what we're leading this big TV show, and what if nothing happens, or what if we just completely mess it up and stuff? And it's exciting, but it's also like quite scary with it because like some of these things can be like make or break for as a person or for our group. It's like such massive opportunities with some big names, and it's like don't want to mess it up, but I'm also like, how do I not mess it up? I've not got that experience, so it's quite it's a scary.
I think the best attitude to that is on your deathbed, are you going to regret not doing it? And the chances are you always, isn't it, you always miss 100% of the shots you don't take. It's like, I don't want to be old and have had a boring life. I want to be someone in the nursing home going, I was a ghost hunter on the telly box, so why you want to be that mad old person. So, but I completely understand how you can get in your own head about it and think, well, what will other people say? What if I get a load of hate online after this? What if I don't angle it right? What if so and so sees it? What if I don't represent myself right? So you won't know until you do it. And everyone gets criticism. Everyone gets horrible things said about them, but they're not the ones on telly talking about UFOs. They're the ones typing it on Facebook. There's always perspective to be gained with that, and I think if there's any opportunities like that coming up and you want to do it, sod it, do it. Chances are you'll get you'll get in front of the camera and your brain will just switch and you'll go, I know exactly what I'm doing. I know my stuff, I know it, and just go. I think we're all really just wind up toys in our heads. We just need a little bit of self-confidence when we get there.
True. I do regret I turned down This Morning a few years ago, because it's during lockdown and they wanted me to go on This Morning when it was Holly and Phil back then, talk about how UFO sightings had increased and all this stuff during lockdown. But we at UFO Identify, we had all the data, and our data actually showed the opposite. We had the biggest database in the UK. We look at all the current day stuff, and our data actually showed that sightings had gone down. But they wanted to talk about how sightings had gone up. So we just
that's tricky, isn't it?
So I was like, I'm not going to go on and say something that's not true.
Yeah.
So I was like, well, I'm not interested. And they got someone on the show who did then go on and talk about how UFO sightings have gone up, and I'm like, where are you getting this from? But he just obviously he was going to say, yeah, I'll be on telly and say that because he's getting his face on telly. Then afterwards, I was like, it's live telly. I could just go on and then just say, actually, it's not, and then just throw out the actual data and cut it short, or whatever.
Yeah.
And that's
you can always
name in front of millions of people then.
Yeah, and you can always reframe things when you're there. Like, you don't have to go up and say, I'm terribly sorry, Holly and Phil, but this is all bollocks. you could, you could reframe it and say, well, while a lot of paranormal sightings have increased, actually, it's very interesting. There's always a way to be diplomatic. Just look at politicians; they manage it, and most of them are thick as anything. So, the rest of us, we've got loads of opportunities to do far better. So, yeah, I think in the future, there's always trust in your own abilities.
True. Well, Kate, thank you very much. It's been absolutely fascinating. Another topic we've not really talked about before the podcast. That's sort of the Gothic history, Victorian sort of history into spiritualism. That's been fascinating. So thanks very much for your time. Make sure you buy the book.
Yes,
keep
do.
an eye on the future for the future books coming out.
Yes, buy all of my words, or I'll haunt you.
There we go. That's great PR and marketing there. I will haunt you if you don't. Cool. Thank you very much. I do appreciate you.
No, thank you for having me. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Pursuit of the Paranormal, title music created by Steve Yarwood and Ambi-Infinity. If you like the show, please follow us on Facebook, YouTube, TikTok, X, and Instagram. And if you really like the show, please rate and review the show wherever you are listening. It really does help. See you next time, and until then, stay weird.